Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today in this video. I've been using my Nikon Z7 II camera for I think approximately 8-9 months now, and I really love the camera. It's a fantastic tool for my landscape photography and it produces some really high quality images. And with the camera comes a wealth of features, some of which are incredibly useful. And in this video I want to talk about 4 features which I find myself using regularly when I'm out doing landscape photography. A few of these features I'm practically using on every shoot, and the others I'm using every other shoot. So I find these really incredibly useful for my photography, and I want to share these with you in this video. As is often the case, today is turning into quite a difficult day for photography. The sky is very blue, the light is very harsh, so that makes things challenging. And it's also difficult for video because the wind is incredibly strong. There's a lot of strong gusts. They're reaching about 40 miles per hour today, I believe. But anyway, I've come into this woodland to try and seek some shelter, and I found a little scene here which caught my eye, and I think it's useful because it'll let me demonstrate a couple of the features that I use regularly on my Nikon Z7 II. So the scene that I'm interested in is just simply these 3 trees here, 1, 2 and 1 off in distance in the middle. They just caught my eye because of the way the light is today. It's incredibly harsh, there's a lot of bright patches and shadow, but this area is more subdued, there's more shade, and the light is occasionally quite nice and soft on these 3 trees, as you may see at the moment perhaps, my shadows on this one. But anyway, let's get behind the Nikon Z7 II and I'll show you a couple of the features that I'm using to photograph this scene. So this has been quite challenging to set up from the point of view of recording video, but hopefully it will show you what I'm doing here. So for the scene in front of me, I'm quite close to my first subject, the first tree, and my depth of field is going to be incredibly shallow because of that, and also I'm at 70mm in my lens, so I'm zoomed in quite a lot and the depth of field is going to be very shallow. So I need to do a focus stack, and I know the Nikon Z7 II has got focus stacking built in, so you can configure a few settings and it will fire off a number of shots focused on different points, but I like to have more control over what I want to do, so I don't use the automatic feature, I like to do it manually. And another thing I'm trying to do when I'm focus stacking is capture all my images in as short a period as possible. Light can constantly be changing and it just makes things easier and more natural looking in post-production if I can capture them all in as short a time as possible. Also, I don't want to introduce any vibration when I'm taking my images, so those are the things that I'm thinking about here, and I use 2 features on the Z7 II which are fantastic for this type of photography here, doing a focus stack. And I also use these features in other ways as well, but this is a great way to demonstrate them. So if we have a look at my Nikon Z7 II screen here, and the wind is picking up at the moment, the light isn't optimal at the moment, but I'll demonstrate how I would take this photograph. So the first feature that I like to enable is my exposure delay mode, and I like to set that to 1 second. So basically, when I tell the camera to take my photograph, everything will be ready to go. It will wait for 1 second and then take the photograph. And because of the next feature that I'm going to use, I think 1 second is more than ample. So the second feature that I'm going to use is simply the touch shutter and touch focus on the Nikon Z7 II. So if I keep working through, there we go, touch shutter and touch AF. So the camera will focus and take the shot simply by 1 touch of my finger, a light touch on the back of the screen here. And because I'm touching the screen very lightly and I've got an exposure delay of 1 second, that is going to be ample for me to get nice sharp images. Now at the moment there's a little bit of wind movement, so I would probably use a faster shutter speed. So let's increase my ISO a little bit here. We'll go for, say, 200. And I'm going to use f16. And I think just to be safe, I'll go for ISO 400 because the wind is picking up quite a lot. And we'll get that shutter speed down to about 1/3 of a second. So that should be ample. So I think for this image, I probably want to take a shot focus on the first tree, the ground between that and the next tree, focus on the other tree there, the second one, and then just nearer that third tree in the distance. I'm quite happy for the background to be soft. That will make the image look better. My primary intent is to get these two trees sharp and the back one slightly softer. I think will be a nice effect, but we can look at that in post-production anyway. But what I need to do is capture the information that I need right here onto my memory card, and the light is not very good at the moment, but this is how I would take the shots. So I simply focus there, focus there, focus on that tree, and we'll focus on the distance there. So that's how I would take my exposures that I need. I've got 4 there, that's going to be ample. Of course I will review these before leaving this spot to ensure that I've got everything sharp where I need it to be across my exposures, and I would blend those together in post-production. But as I say, some very useful features. The exposure delay mode and touch shutter and touch AF are very useful in my opinion for doing a multiple shot focus blend. When on location, I wanted to make sure that I captured enough images so I could have all 3 of the main trees sharp. However, when studying the scene off camera and looking at my images on location, I felt the final photograph would look best, at least to my eyes, without having all 3 of the trees sharp. I confirmed this feeling when reviewing my images in post-production, and I chose to blend together only 2 of the images to get the final result that I wanted. So I've moved out of the woodland and it is now incredibly cold and incredibly windy, and this section is proving very difficult to record. My video camera's blown over 3 times. I fixed that issue, stabilised it, and the battery ran out. So I replaced the battery and then my memory card filled up. So hopefully this will be the final take. But anyway, what I want to talk about in this section is something I've been utilising to help me frame up my image for the scene behind me. If I move out of the way just a little bit, you'll see it hopefully off in the distance, but it's much bleaker now. There was some really nice light in that area when I took my shots. So the feature that I've been using on the Z7 II is called the image area, or basically the aspect ratio. So in previous cameras that I've used for photography, they've all had a native 3:2 aspect ratio, and I always shoot in RAW. And on location, if I chose a different aspect ratio, say a 1:1, once you go into Lightroom, open the RAW file, you would see your 1:1 aspect ratio. But if you hit the crop tool, you would still see the full 3:2 image, so you could adjust your crop a bit. On the Z7 II, if I shoot in say 5:4 or 1:1, that is baked into the RAW file. I can obviously crop in, but you can't crop outwards and get the full 3:2 aspect ratio. So that's something I noticed very early with having this camera. So what I like to do is go into the menus, go through the various aspect ratios when I'm taking a photograph. I'll usually look at a scene and think, well, this is maybe going to suit a 16:9 or a 5:4. Set that crop in the camera and take one shot at that aspect ratio, so say 5:4. And then what I will then do is switch it back to what is called FX, or the full 3:2 aspect ratio, and then take a series of images. I may want to take 1 or 2 as the light's changing. And I'm a great believer in trying to get things perfect in camera, but just by taking one shot in the aspect ratio that I'm visualizing, say a 5x4, but then taking the rest in the full 3x2, it gives me a little freedom once I go back to Lightroom to maybe just move that crop a little bit left to right, or if it's a 16:9, a little bit up or down. And as I say, I like to get things perfect in camera, but it's very good just to have that safety measure, simply in case that when you look on a large screen, you notice some details that you couldn't see on your rear screen or looking through the viewfinder, and you realize if you just move the crop just a fraction, it's going to be a better end result. So that's how I like to work it. Shoot one image, say at 5x4 if that's the aspect ratio that I want, and when I look in Lightroom it will remind me that's the crop that I was thinking about, and then I'll have a few images at the full 3x2 and I'll edit those and apply that crop. So really useful, something I've been using here. I'll show you the image that I've took, and yeah, it's now time to move on and try and heat up a bit, I think. It's almost sunset now. I think there's about 10-15 minutes of light left, and I've captured my final image for today. I'll show you that one in just a minute, but I want to talk about feature number 4 that I use regularly on my Nikon Z7 II. In fact, I use this one pretty much on every photograph that I take, and I've been using it for the one that I've just captured. So when you're framing up a shot, or you've got your shot framed up and you're looking through the viewfinder, checking your composition, or looking at your rear screen on the back of the camera, there is so much information there. You may have a histogram, you may have your shutter speed, various other settings related to your exposure and so on, and there's a lot that can get in your way, including the grid lines potentially on your screen. So what I do before every shot I take is simply press what is, I believe, the movie record button on the top of the Nikon Z7 II. And when you're in stills mode, if you press that button, it clears your screen of the grid lines and all the information that's on the display. And this is incredibly useful, so you can really get a good look at what you're photographing, and you may suddenly notice a few little things creeping in at the edges of your frame, which you previously couldn't see due to all the information that's on your display. So that's something I use before every photograph that I take. And it's also very useful, this button, to clear your screen, for another reason. I think it can be incredibly useful for developing your own skills in the area of composition, developing your eye for composition. That's a bit out with the scope of this video. However, I have covered that topic in a previous video that I've made. So if you've enjoyed this one and want to hear more about that, then I'll put a link up in the corner of this video and also in the description below. So go and have a look at that one. But here is the photograph that I've captured, my final one for today. I really hope you've enjoyed watching this video, and if you shoot with the Nikon Z7 II, hopefully you found a few things that you maybe don't use yourself at the moment, but you can incorporate into your own photography. But as always, I really do appreciate you watching. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's been quite a difficult one to film, so if you've enjoyed it or found it useful, consider giving it a like rating. And if you're not yet subscribed to my channel, please do consider subscribing, and also share the video around if you've got other photographers that you know who may find this useful. But for now, I hope you've enjoyed watching, and I'll see you in my next one.